Okay, cool, it's on. Okay, let me just check everything works, because this probably could go horribly wrong if it doesn't. Yes, okay, cool. So I've got a live demo, which I could be cursed for doing, but I'm going to try and do it anyway, and hopefully that will work and be really cool. So I'm Aubrey Stearn. I'm the head of DevOps for the Arcadia group. I said all my talks, if you're the head of DevOps, you're probably doing it wrong. So hopefully my title gets eviscerated within the next year, and everything that I do folds into development, and that will become the future. So if you want to tweet me, it's allveryberry. And if you want to tweet me and get some kudos from my company, it would be Arcadia Social on Twitter. Now, the title of the talk is what my dad taught me about ChatOps. And I remember Dad telling me a story once about a guy who came up with his own sort of like version of Kung Fu. And the theory was that if you couldn't do it in a phone box, it wouldn't work in a pub fight, which is probably a very brummy thing to come up with, but it sort of resonated with me in terms of like some things are overpowered or overspaced for the space that you have to work in. Obviously, I'm a transgender woman, and once upon a time I used to carry one of these around, which is the Oakley kitchen sink bag, and you can carry everything in this thing. You can carry it everywhere. And obviously, I got better at this, and when I did, it means I had to swap to that. And so you can only just about fit a MacBook in there, but it's a pain in the ass, it's really heavy, and I can never fit anything else in my bag. And so what I really wanted to do is carry less stuff with me. It's really small. So I can't get a MacBook into my handbag. And so what I really want to do is be able to have all this functionality and all this cool stuff with me at all times. And so most of the time I'm looking to carry around something that has my tooling, but in a portable form. Now, ChatOps reminds me a lot of the shift from, if I think when I was developing full-time in Visual Studio, you have a lot of tooling, a lot of debug stuff. You're really well looked after. When I left the Microsoft world to go and start my startup, I couldn't afford Microsoft tooling. And I had to switch to Nix and open source and leave Windows behind. And when I did, I was writing Node.js. And when I did that, I was writing it basically in a glorified TextPad with no debug, and it was kind of strange. But then I got into Bash and was using everything from the command line, and the GUIs went away. And so that shift from this big monolithic set of tooling to smaller command line stuff was relatively, I guess it kind of resonates with what this is, this shift from like, I'm going to give a partner this application that I specifically built to extend tooling to them, to actually now, here's something through a command line, and further to that, here's something that I can do through my bot in ChatOps that I can give to a partner. One of the cool things about ChatOps is that it's inherently like perpetuating. So when people use your commands and start to work with them through the team, other people will see that and automatically start learning about the capabilities that you've built, which is really interesting. I have a really cool hack that I would do quite often, which is even though I've wrote something that's scoped to a particular channel or place or purpose, I tend to go and put that on the general channel so that everybody can see it when I start to test it, and people start to see what I'm doing and get interested in it, and then eventually somebody will get really, really annoyed with what I've done, and they'll go and move it to a different channel. And that's kind of how I get them to interact with the source code, by writing something really annoying and get them to learn about what I've done by putting it somewhere really, really obvious. So I've actually seen really good engagement from POs in terms of being able to roll releases into production, move containers from a Canary environment into production, which is quite cool. Stuff that you can build. This was a really interesting piece. I had a new starter in my team a few weeks ago. And when somebody joins, I spend time with that person because I want them to understand how I work, why I hired them, the way that everybody else works with me. And generally, when you're in my DevOps team, the first thing you do is write code. I'm a big believer in the SRE initiative, and so almost everybody that I hire for the DevOps team is an ex-developer or current developer. And so when Matt joined the team, we thought about what we could build together. And what we came up with was a timeline piece. And we thought, okay, so when you use the website, so Topman, Topshop, Wallace, Burton, Miss Selfridge, any of those Arcadia websites, we generate what's called a trace ID. And essentially, this is the correlation idea that will run through all the microservices, but it's generated in the front end. And it allows us just to start tracing that stuff. From the moment that you're not a customer or you haven't done a transaction, we can go and follow you through the site. So we thought, wouldn't it be cool to expose this stuff? So if anybody who doesn't know how to use Kibana and Elastic probably isn't going to be able to follow that trace ID, how can we expose this to new people? And so we wrote this piece of conversation, which takes that trace ID, sends it to the bot. The bot then forms a query and sends it to Elasticsearch. It pulls back the logging for that particular user. Then we use some handlebars, HTML, and some CSS that I borrowed because I'm crap at that. And then we run that through Puppeteer. Puppeteer will then go and render it in a headless Chrome. We will take a screenshot of that and dump it to Amazon S3, generate a secure S3 link, and send it back to the client. And what that looks like when we do it, I wasn't willing to risk this in a live demo. So we're going to go find trace ID, and we push through that live user trace ID that we pulled from the client. And he goes and gets that, does the generation, pulls the logs from Elastic, builds a screenshot, saves it to S3, dumps it to the client, and you end up with something that looks like this, which I think is pretty neat considering the amount of time that it took us to do it. And this was somebody who doesn't really know Node.js and has never really done this stuff before, and it took basically a day to knock this together with some tests, just to help that person understand the capabilities of the bot and how we build ephemeral tooling. And this really is just temporary tooling that doesn't have to be around for long, that we can go and extend and add more value to. And it actually forms probably the precursor to our journey in open tracing, which is something that we're working on now, which there's another talk about. So this next one is called Alerts Pipeline. And I somewhat changed my views on this, just in terms of what this can do to your team, but I'll talk about that later. Now, I used to think this was really cool. The beginning part of this is what is an error? To you, what is an error? What's the thing that wakes you up? What's the thing that makes you move and react to something? So in terms of our error level logging, a level 50 for us is when a customer can't order. So anything leading up to that event, we would class as a level 50. And so it's been really interesting taking the developers through this journey. Often when I'm hired, one of the first things that I'll say when I talk to the stakeholders is, am I empowered to work in the development space? An absolutely huge part of what I do is PR. A huge part of what I do is working inside development rather than the DevOps silo. And it's to go and bring a certain capability to developers. If I think about what CI and CD mean, we can achieve that pretty quickly. I can usually do that in about a day and just prove this is how you do it. But if I think about all of the things that are needed for a developer to be able to leverage that capability, all of the hygiene required in their code to be able to use those capabilities, to be confident that they're pushing something at the right standard to a canary environment in front of real users, and be sure that's working before it gets rolled into a production environment, that's a lot of work. And most development teams aren't in that space. And so often what I do is spend time with that team to take them to that level of hygiene where they have 100% test coverage. Because if you have 100% test coverage, you're probably at around 50% of what you really need. Take into account the negative test coverage. Maybe they don't have the ability to do stubs and mocks yet, and they're still dependent on the environments. Maybe they haven't decoupled from their monolith, and they're still in that state, and they don't have microservices, so we can't fold the domain into a smaller model. And so a big part of that whole exercise is what is an error. And so we define that as you can't order. So this is the thing that I want to go and pipe through to people when something goes terribly, terribly wrong and I need their attention. So the idea is that we will go and poll whatever our repository is for our logging. So we're querying for level 50s at this point. So we're going to poll something for errors, and then we're going to push the errors into the pipeline one by one. We're going to apply a process that we're going to output something to the bot. And so there are a couple of core pieces to this. We call them auto actions, auto triage, and auto stats. And so auto actions, in comes our little thing. So this is our error, and it goes to auto actions first, and that will, auto triage first. And what this will do is apply some meta to it. So if it's an error that we know about, something that we understand already, then we're going to apply, and this is really just something that we've written into the bot to say, like, here's an index, this is the type of error that it is, and this is the meaning of this is the meta. We'll go and build that output. It's less useful for people that have been around that understand what this stuff is. It's more useful for people who join the team because it's immediately obvious what this thing is and how they can work with it. Obviously, you don't want to find this stuff lingering around too long. If something's been sitting there too long, then you should probably do something about it or deprecate it to a warn. So then it goes to auto actions, and this is where we look at how we can apply actions to it. So what are you going to do? What do I want to do? What can I do from my mobile? What's really, really terrible about the mobile experience when you're working with the bot is having to type something, especially a correlation ID that's a GUID. It's like impossible, and I always screw it up, and I want an easy way of being able to extend tooling to people on mobile. So we build a bunch of buttons, action buttons in Slack or Teams, and let the user click on those to go and cause remedial actions, I guess. And then auto stats is something that I wrote in the background in terms of how often is this error happening to me? Am I seeing this a lot? Am I seeing like a frequency increase? I mean, sure, there's tooling in AWS that will expose this to me, but it's also quite nice to have the bot do this, and I can sort of see, maybe it's a bad night, maybe I've lost some of the network, maybe I've got a network split. I can then go and say, okay, so I'm going to turn this one off. I'm going to turn this off for an hour because I'm seeing it way too much, and I know that this is going to happen, and then I can close down some of the noise and keep people looking at this channel and keep them alert. And so off that goes, and the bot will say something. I love the flame effect. So what this looks like in reality is this. And so you can see that we had this level 50 come in on Monty, which is our headless desktop application. This runs separate from our whole e-commerce platform, and we'll hook into it. And so we saw this issue on orders complete, and it was the old version, and someone was doing a payment, and something happened. And then obviously we've got the auto context there, so this error will occur when a user's cookie becomes invalid during checkout. So they've held onto the site too long, tried to go through checkout, this thing has expired midway through, and that's what's happened. And then obviously the auto actions have said, okay, so open the event in Kibana, so we can go and follow that and pull the surrounding events, which is quite cool. And then we have something called tea leaf running, which lets us track user journeys, and so you can replay the journey, and that will allow you to walk the site with the user and watch what happened. Which I think is really, really useful. And what's pretty cool about this is this is all run in the pub. So if something starts burning down, you can go and do this while you're having a pint, which is quite a British thing. When you only care about failure, use the bot. This was something particularly painful to me when I was trying to push the bot initially at Arcadia. And it comes back to integrations. Ninja sex party. So if you Google NSP, which is the node security platform, you'll find Ninja Sex Party, but that's not what it means. It's node security platform. And node security platform have this webhook plugin that will tell you about the successes and failures of the builds. And the idea is that if you're running a node JS application and you've got your modules in there and you want to scan for vulnerabilities in real time, you want this thing to alert you whenever there's a known vulnerability in your packages, node security will do that on every push. The bad thing about this is that it sends you a success and a failure. And I don't really want to know about successes. I mostly don't care about when anything's successful. I only care when it burns down, much like people only care about me when something breaks. And so what I did was to push this stuff through the bot and start filtering the successes out so I only ever got the failures and generate an awful lot of noise. That was a really cool usage of the bot to solve a problem. So common pitfalls when you're implementing ChatOps. Oh my God, let's integrate everything. This is like the first thing that happens to almost every team when they go and do ChatOps. Immediately start adding Jira, and they add GitHub, and they add Circle, and they add Jenkins, and they always do it on the development channel. And then you have the development channel, and it's completely being spammed by every notification ever. And if you've obviously got a big dev team, you'll see a lot of this. And then somebody has a really great idea. Oh, okay, hey guys, there's too much noise going on. And then you go and create the dev channel. So almost in every team, there's the development channel, and there's the dev channel. And the dev channel is more like the meta where it really happens. I see this quite often. Very, very annoying. try and stop people from doing it. So this is something that will come up in your maturity journey for DevOps. I've got lots of notes on this, so I'm going to sit over here. So when I see people say answering the bot with a response, yes, yeah, yep, yup, there's a lot of these. In BotKit, we call them utterances, and some of them are built in. It leads nicely onto natural language processing, which is a way of teaching the bot to respond based on historical commands. Now, this gets quite deep. So natural language processing also includes natural language understanding and natural language generation, which is the idea of teaching the bot how to understand something and then teaching the bot how to generate a response based on its understanding of something. There are various services out there which will do this stuff for you on demand. And most of them are sort of platformized, so they kind of have their own bot stuff going on, and you kind of build it like turnkey and do it on the website. There are a couple of cool libraries which work really well. So Synaptic.js is a neural network. This one is slightly more complicated, so it's the concept of using simulated neurons to build a neural network, and the idea is that when it finds a success and moves to the next node to do something, it builds a stronger link between them, and when something fails, it weakens that link, and eventually you're only left with this happy path where something is very, very successful. It takes a little bit of time to get into that one. I would probably start with something very turnkey and start with something very, very simple before you move on to using NLP initially. So, salient, natural, and speak easy are some of the easiest ones to work with in Node.js. Speak easy are particularly turnkey if you want to do the NLP route. I made a monolith. During your ChatOps journey, your maturity will improve. You will have loads of really cool tooling. All sorts of parts of the business will be using it. And eventually, you'll become really dependent on it. And that's when you realize you've made a monster. Suddenly, it's business critical, and if it goes, you don't know how to do it. And I remember when I worked at Pizza Hut Digital Ventures, when we had the bot drop, which was like, this can happen, we hadn't really thought this through, but the bot dropped, and then people couldn't remember how to actually execute something manually anymore. And it was just like, oh my God, what do we do? How do we close this shop? So you have to be aware that this thing could die on you, and I guess how you split the fault domain up on that one. So now we're fucked. This is particularly pertinent. I'm glad that Microsoft are here and not AWS. So last year, I think it was 2017 at the beginning, S3 dropped. And I think that was because somebody ran something a little bit too zealously on the back end and wiped out most of Amazon S3, and then pretty much the whole internet dropped, and we could see exactly who was using Amazon as their service. That affected Pizza Hut while I was there, and we were lucky enough to go and bump the TTL on S3, and so we were just leveraging the cache when S3 was dead, and then it was like, oh, lucky, just about surviving. But a lot of people got really affected. I think Slack dropped during that time, which was quite interesting. And so we lost the bot, and obviously AWS was blowing up at the time, and so that dropped, and it could have been AWS that was the root cause for that. But potentially this could happen. So I guess you need to think carefully about what you're putting into the bot and what that looks like when it goes wrong and how you become more agnostic. So the demo that I'll show you a bit later, we used Microsoft Teams in Arcadia, which is a big shift from me because I'm used to working with Slack. Last week, they rolled a patch out, which was, I don't know what that was, but needless to say, my bots have stopped working. And so this weekend, I had to go and port all of my code to Slack just so I can go do the demos for you. So the demo will be a little bit ropey. But again, it's depending on the framework, this could be easier or harder for you. I use BotKit. I'm a contributor to BotKit. That would probably be the route that I take. It was relatively easy to swap out most things, and the only thing that was really different was the message formatting and how I was building those responses. Demo time, Scale API. This was actually from when I was working at Pizza Hut Digital Ventures. we had this scenario. And so when you're on the alerts rotor, potentially something that can come in, and because this was a, what do we call it? A design, build, operate, and transfer effort, so it's built outside the enterprise, in a WeWork, away from the corporate enterprise. We had none of the support, none of the integration within the business, none of the process. We'd essentially hijacked the corporate machine and built this new website and new system outside of everything. And so when it went live, we sort of inherited a bunch of these old legacy processes. And one of those things that was closing a hut. So at Pizza Hut, when you close a hut, you're going to get like an angry franchise owner or person on a phone sending a text message or an email saying, something's blown up, the washing machine doesn't work, or the extractor fan doesn't work, I need to close this hut. And so that actually fell on the dev team for quite a while. And so what would happen is somebody would send this angry email to me, and I'd be sitting there watching on my laptop, and what I have to do is some magic science, and then close the hut. You can see I like the burning animation quite a lot. And so I thought, well, I've been doing this for like 6 months at this point, and I thought, God, I must be able to do this a better way. Like, how do I do this? How do I improve upon this crappy process that I'm doing manually? And anything manual drives me crazy, and most people will know that about me. So I thought, okay, I'm sure I can put this through the bot, right? Some NLP or something. So I needed a turnkey solution. I didn't want to spend more than like 6 hours on this. So guy sends no, there's a middle part. So I put a brain in there, which is the bot. It's the bot. The bot's in the cloud. And so the guy sends the angry email, but this time it goes to the bot. And the bot will go and read that email. And then the bot will go and send that to Scale API. There's no chicken and rabbits in there. It's actually Scale API. And so Scale is this really cool thing. It looks like it's AI, but it's not AI. It's kind of the opposite of that. It's powered by humans, which is really cool. So you can go and do all of the normal like AI stuff that you do, like categorization and bucketing, and what's the difference between these two things, and what does it fall into in terms of category. And you can go and send this message to those guys, and they will get a human to interpret what you've sent in terms of data and send it back, which is quite interesting. It's the reverse of machine learning and AI. And so I thought, this is great. All they need to go and do is figure out from the email if they want to open or close a hut, or open or close delivery. And so we would go and send that, and the idea is that they would go and send that back to us, and the bot would go and do something, and then burn down the hut. So what that looked like, this is probably one of the worst demos. So originally when I got asked these talks last year, I went to go and do these, and I thought, this is great. I'm going to fill up half my talk with demos. It'll be really great. And then I realized that actually when I started to do the demos, that they would take like 20 seconds. And so I had to build a lot more content. And so this one was, we would go and send the request to Scale API, please close the hut, blah, 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 blah. And that request would go off. And then they would come back and say, the hut has been successfully closed. Thank you. And now, what that actually turns out is that a complete lie, and I fabricated that demo, and it's not true whatsoever, because if you read the manual and Scale API really carefully, they tell you it takes 6 hours for a priority response to come back, so it wasn't really useful. But I did kind of try. So the canary is an interesting part of something we did with the bot. I find that when I work with teams, quite often, they're not really aligned around business metrics. And what drives us, I guess traditionally as an engineer, when I think back, I've only really cared about infrastructure metrics, and I've only really cared about dev metrics. But the one thing that I never really homed around was what the business metrics look like. What do the sales look like? What do the transactions look like? What do conversions look like? These are the things that should make me move in the morning. These are the things that when I scrum my teams together and we huddle in the morning, we look at those metrics and we use them to drive us. We look at if something's down. Is it Tuesday? Are the sales down? Should they be down? Okay, they are down. Which platform are they down on? They're down on Android, okay? And which vendor? Samsung, okay. Are people using the Samsung browser again? Something that always comes up. And so we huddle around those metrics and we use them to drive us and drive the decisions for the day and our direction for the day. And so a really cool tool that you could potentially use is something called StatsBot. StatsBot will take I don't think it works with Omniture yet, but it works with GA, and it will pull your GA stats, and it keeps an eye on them. and gives you the ability to say, okay, look, so we're actually trending differently from where we were this time last week. Something must be up, which is really, really cool, because we've had some situations where we pushed, for example, new versions of React Forms. Potentially, so at Pizza Hut, they have one environment. It's trunk-based development. Everything goes into one environment. Their canary is behind feature flags, and so one of the things that doesn't catch is when you push out framework changes. Framework changes, obviously, if you're going to push them out, and you can't hide those behind a feature flag without a great deal of pain, and so that usually catches us. And then obviously if it breaks something, it will manifest in a particular device or vendor, and so we'll see that. So StatSpots is really good as the canary. Have I killed something? Where are I? Yeah, let's talk about how to burn your team out really fast. This, without a shadow of a doubt, happens to almost every team that has a particular level of maturity around ChatOps. It's already really hard for me to disconnect from the business. Email used to be one of those things where we would just like sort of reply. Now we're all connected to Slack and Teams. It's even harder. It's real time. It happens all the time. It's 3,000 times worse if you go and do what I just told you to do, which is to go and run all your alerts through the chat platform. It looks really cool, but you'll end up with a super high burnout rate for your team. I would think really carefully about doing that these days. For example, Arcadia really isn't at that level of maturity where we're in a place where we can run those alerts full-time using the filters that I told you about. You would end up with something like 2,000 errors a minute, which is insane. Pizza Hut was a greenfield project, and so it was really easy to work there because we only had a few of those every hour, and it was quite easy to pipe those through, and obviously sometimes it would be better, sometimes it would be worse. The other thing that happens is that I guess when you see people online constantly triaging, say, I know what this is this thing, or this is because of that, or I push this piece of code, it raises the bar for the rest of the team. And you would think that this is actually kind of a good thing, but it can potentially be a bad thing. And so what I originally saw was people who would leave at 5 and 6, and they would start to be on the chat, and they would start to triage things. Eventually it was 7, sometimes at 8, and then I saw more of the team would be online. And so constantly this bar would be being pushed up, pretty much by the rest of the team just doing this thing, just replying casually while watching TV. And eventually people were online until like 11, 12 o'clock at night, which is crazy when you think about it. When you don't have the discipline around disconnecting your team and saying, hey, please don't be online, please leave this to the person who's on the alerts rota, you end up with a really, really, really high burnout rate. And I don't think it's particularly healthy. And it's something that I'm incredibly conscious about with my team. So I don't ask that everybody's online. Obviously, I do appreciate when they look at alerts and triage them. But I do try and make sure that I say to them, hey, please, if you're not working, like try and go and do something out, play some video games or something. Stuff to build an on-call system. So this is the demo that could go horribly wrong and may take some fiddling. We are in the middle of launching a brand new platform at Arcadia. And because Arcadia is an enterprise, I guess one thing that some of you may have been through is enterprise funding systems and how you fund something. They can be notoriously difficult. So if I said, hey, I need people on call, and I need a way to reach out to them and say, what are you doing? How do you, like something's burning down, I need your help. How do I do that? How do I fund that? It would take me weeks, and I might fail at getting a on-call system. So in the spirit of ephemeral tooling and things that I need for the minute, I thought, hey, I could go and build this stuff into the bot, right? This could be really easy. And so what this looks like when you build this conversation, we're pretty much using 2 components for this. So there's Amazon DynamoDB, and the first thing this asks you to do is register. So if it doesn't know who you are, it's going to say, hey, I don't know who you are, what's your phone number? Or do you want to register, and what's your phone number? And the next part of that is there are 4 core commands to this. So who is on call? Then is I'm on call, which is when you want to be on call. Then there is don't call me, when you've had enough and you want to tap out. And then finally, page on call, which uses Twilio. And I thought to myself one morning, I could write this with my new guy, and I think this will be really, really quick, and I think it's about 5 distinct commands, and I'm pretty much just using CRUD at this point. So I'm storing a phone number, and there's really not much more to that, and just saying I am or I'm not on call. And then there's the page on call part. So let's see if this works. Hold on. You kind of wish there's like lift music or something. There we go, okay. So, right, ArcBot is online. So there is a strong chance this is going to fail a couple of times in a row because, as I said, the conversational code that I wrote was working with Microsoft Teams. It's not as mature as Slack, and so the stuff that I usually would write for Slack didn't work, and there was a bunch of hacks to get this stuff to work cooperatively. So we're going to do on call. Awesome. So what can I do? So let's try who's on call. Yep. Let's do that again. Come on, bot. There we go. Aubrey Stearn is on call. So, not that one. This is that moment, right? If it's going to work. Page on call. Dun, 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 dun. Yay! So now we know that live demos by applause. Okay, so what that would have told me is, hello, Aubrey Stearn, the platform is burning down. Please come onto Microsoft Teams as soon as possible and make yourself known. Now, there are, wait. I need my slides. It's not so useful if I just talk about a presentation that doesn't exist. Cool. Improvements to the system. So this took me a day to write this. I didn't write the test, so I sort of broke my own rule here. Normally, I enforce like 100% test coverage on the bot. I'm pretty prissy about that because I feel like it's a really good example to set in terms of who generally works on development. So my team is the one that generally works on the bot, and we try and get everybody involved. But because we spend so much time in development trying to help these guys to get to the point where they have a particular level of hygiene to work with CI/CD pipelines, we enforce the same sort of dogfooding rule that everybody else does. So we say 100% test coverage and then some more. So it's us pushing this. So in terms of improvements to this, things I didn't have time to do, who acknowledged? So I think what would be really cool is to have the callback to say, somebody actually picked up the phone and somebody actually said, okay, I'm going to come online. So I think we can do that with Twilio. Scheduling. So this obviously was originally written for Microsoft Teams, which, as good a platform as it is, it's missing some really cool features. So one of my favorite things about Slack is that it has the ambient command. The ambient command, oh my God, it's like the best thing ever. So it will just pick up something that's been said by another bot or something that randomly occurs in the chat. You don't have to target the bot. In Microsoft Teams, you specifically have to go and target the bot and say, I need you to do something, which is really, really annoying because one of the cool things about ambient is that when you accidentally type something and you didn't know there was a command, the bot will then go, hey, you know you can do this? And it's like, oh, I'm learning all the time. Well, you can't do that with ambient. So what's also really annoying is that when you use Slackbot to schedule something, so you can do a reminder, you can actually use the reminders to trigger at a particular time. And so what happens is then you fire the reminder to say, I'm on call, and then the idea is that the other bot in ambient would go and pick up this and then go and change your on-call rota. So essentially, if you wrote this in Slack, your scheduling would be free, which is something that we used to do at Pizza Digital Ventures quite a lot. I guess this is something that potentially, I know it's been asked on the Microsoft Teams improvement list, but it's something that might happen at some point. An auto page for alerts. So to make someone's life even more crazy, when I talked to you earlier about using your level 50s and being able to do your automated alerts and to pull those from Elastic and then automatically push them into the bot, triage them, then I thought I could auto-page, right? I can get people can call people immediately and say, something's burning down. And I thought, well, actually, with 2,000 alerts every hour at Arcadia, it's probably not going to work very well. But potentially, when we get ourselves to the maturity level, or at least I start to break down some of this monolith into more microservices, it becomes something that's a bit more realizable. So where do I begin? So if you were going to choose a chat client, I would say right now Slack has the highest maturity level, one of my favorites and easiest to work with. Once upon a time, there was something called the real-time messaging system, and that essentially was socket-based. What used to be incredibly cool about this was the old conundrum of how do I get multiple people debugging and adding to the bot at the same time? It's really painful when you're working over HTTP. Over sockets, it's incredibly easy because you can connect everybody to the same thing and you get the same messages. So you can load up different conversations and filter them out, and then some people have been working on different things. It's deprecated now, and so Slack say the best thing for you to do is to work with the normal HTTP stuff. If you are doing that, what you could potentially do is take the express router, monkey patch it, so that when anything comes in on the incoming route, forward it to any registered ngrok addresses. So generally when I debug, I have my bot connected via ngrok to create a tunnel between Slack and my local instance. If you're monkey patching router and then forwarding to any registered local ngrok, it means you could just register your local ngrok address and say forward everything, and then that kind of works. The bot, I would say BotKit, I have the most experience with it. I am a contributor. It's very mature for where it is. There have been a couple of bugs in the lesser known chat systems, so I don't know how well it works with things like Cisco Spark. I know that there's a good level of maturity around Slack and Facebook Messenger, and write some bot code. So if you're writing in BotKit, then you're probably writing in Node.js. You could also use Atlassian HipChat, Facebook, Cisco Spark, Slack, Skype, and FlowDoc, and Microsoft Teams, which isn't here, but obviously Teams and Skype share the same backbone now. In terms of bot, Lita, BotKit, and Hubot. Lita, I think, is in Ruby, so if there's any Ruby people out there, that will work for you too. And I had this really good question when I did this talk a few weeks ago. Somebody said to me, how do I do multilingual bots? So if I have teams working globally and they work in different languages, how does that work? And I thought, God, what a really good question. I don't have a good answer for this. And I think, well, actually, if I was able to use NLP and I was able to start training the bot to do this stuff, so if any of you have done like TensorFlow, you'll know that you're essentially firing huge payloads of data to train something, to train these neurons to learn about the right way to do something, and the same with your bot. So some of these libraries that I mentioned earlier will allow you to fire multiple efforts of the same question at the bot to train it about what might be the question and what the intent might be in there and how to pull them out and extract it and say, oh, this is related to that command. So potentially NLP could be a good way to do multilingual. And finally, because I thought I might run out of time, I added 2 extra slides, I think. So this is something that I said and something that I push quite a lot at work. Engineer for today's challenges. Engineers have a predisposition to engineer for problems that aren't there, or things that might happen, or things that could occur. And it's the enemy of delivering quickly. And so when I try and write my solutions, I try and scope them to the current problem, because the things that might happen are actually part of tomorrow's development. And a really good example of this is when I was working at Arcadia a couple of weeks ago. I sat down with the devs and I said, hey, Samir and I are going to go and write this thing for the bot. It's going to take about 4 hours, and we're going to go and have all the feature flags be able to turn on and off from the bot. And we're going to start with 1. And they said, yeah, we think this is going to take about 3 weeks. And I was like, no, it's going to take 4 hours. No, and they were like 3 weeks. And I was like, why 3 weeks? And they were like, we need sockets, we need this. And you're going to have this problem when you have like more than 1 feature flag. These things are going to clash with other feature flags. And I said, well, guys, I only have 1 feature flag. I'm only writing 1 feature flag. I don't have, the truth is, if I actually had 10 feature flags, none of them might clash. So these guys were engineering for something that actually hadn't even happened yet. and they were very ingrained in this mindset. And so one thing I ask my engineers to do quite often is do apply common sense and do apply normal thought to this, but try and focus on the thing that you currently have as a problem and not the thing that might happen, because the truth is that might not ever happen and you're wasting all this time developing for it. And don't forget the PR. As I said, I do an awful lot of PR. I spend so much time working with the development teams. It's the thing that I ask when I join a company. Am I empowered to step on people's toes in the development space? I am a developer, a production application developer, so I will work on React, I will work on Node.js, I will work on all of the microservices that all the other devs do, and I will still run DevOps, and I will do all the DevOpsy things. And so it's really important for me to have a great working relationship with developers. I always say to my guys that we are subservient to dev. Ultimately, I see DevOps folding into development space as something that's just part of doing development. But we spend an awful lot of time doing PR, so don't make yourself the enemy. Make yourself the friend. Make yourself approachable. Get these guys to work with you. Do some bot with them, and fold yourself in. Thank you for having me talk. Again, if you want to tweet me, Aubrey, and mention if this was a good or crap talk, Arcadia Social, and you can email me and find my blog there. Thank you. Ooh. Does anyone have questions? There might be some. Anyone? Well, this is good. Or bad. Could be bad. Or maybe I've just explained it really well. OK. Well, if anyone wants anything, you can find me afterwards. Cool. I don't know what happens next. I feel like someone should have told me if I was meant to tell you where to go or something. It feels good.
So let's do a break, have a coffee, and see you in a bit. Thank you very much.